The morning was bright, but there was a heaviness in the air as the woman stepped out of her car and walked toward the local bank. She had been there many times before, always greeted politely, always welcomed, and today she had an important reason to be there. She needed to withdraw a sum of money for a pressing family matter. Her heart was calm but purposeful as she approached the automatic doors that slid open silently in front of her. Inside, the hum of conversation mixed with the soft clatter of keyboards and the occasional ring of telephones. Everything seemed normal. She walked up to the counter, her documents neatly prepared in a small folder. The bank manager, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a stern expression, noticed her immediately. There was something in the manager's gaze that felt dismissive, almost as if she were already judging her before a single word was spoken. The woman smiled politely, offered a greeting, and handed over her identification and bank card. She asked to make a withdrawal, mentioning the amount and the reason. She tried to keep her tone friendly, professional, and unassuming, but the manager's response was not what she expected. Instead of assisting, the manager leaned back, scrutinized the papers, and furrowed her brow. "Are you sure you have the authority to withdraw this much money?" she asked. There was no warmth in her voice, only suspicion. The woman's smile faltered slightly. She had done everything correctly. Her account had ample funds, all documentation was in order. Yet the manager continued to question her, as if doubting her integrity or her need for the withdrawal. The woman stayed calm, answering each question politely and providing any additional information requested. But the manager's expression hardened with every passing minute. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry, but I can't process this withdrawal today. There are certain policies that prevent me from approving it." The words hit like a cold wind. Policies, she thought. She had followed every rule, every requirement. She felt small, invisible, and unfairly judged. A tight knot formed in her chest. She tried to reason with the manager, explaining her urgency and her credentials, but the manager shook her head. Other tellers glanced over, some with curiosity, others with a hint of unease. There was a quiet tension in the room, but nobody spoke up. Feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief, she decided not to push further. She politely collected her documents and left the counter. As she walked out of the bank, she felt a rush of emotions: anger, humiliation, and a burning sense of injustice. She paused for a moment outside, taking a deep breath and staring at the building that had just made her feel powerless. The sunlight did little to warm her mood. She thought about how she had come in expecting ordinary service, only to face prejudice hidden behind professional decorum. The irony was painful. She was a regular client, someone who had trusted the bank for years, and yet in those few minutes she had been treated as though she were less than worthy. She walked back to her car, her mind racing. The incident kept replaying in her thoughts. The manager's stern look, the dismissive tone, the way she had been made to feel insignificant. It was not just about the money anymore. It was about respect, fairness, and dignity. She realized that this was not an isolated incident, but a reflection of a larger problem she had seen in other places as well. The feeling of being judged and denied opportunities simply because of who she was struck her deeply. But as the initial shock began to fade, a different feeling started to emerge. Beneath the anger and hurt, a spark of determination grew. She was not someone who allowed setbacks to define her. She had faced challenges before and had always found a way to rise above them. She began thinking clearly, considering her options. There was a lesson here, she realized. A lesson about resilience, about not letting someone else's bias dictate her life. The incident had shaken her, but it had not defeated her. In fact, it had ignited a quiet fire inside her, a resolve to turn the situation around. Driving away from the bank, she reflected on her achievements and the skills she had developed over the years. She had built a successful career, managed complex projects, and navigated challenging situations with intelligence and composure. She had always believed in planning, strategy, and seizing opportunities. And now she realized there was a unique opportunity in front of her, not just to recover what was denied, but to create a change so significant that such incidents would not happen again. Not to her, not to anyone else. By the time she reached home, her thoughts had shifted from frustration to action. She sat down at her desk, opened her laptop, and began researching options. She looked into the bank's ownership, the history of similar situations, and the financial landscape that might allow her to make a difference. Every detail she uncovered fueled her sense of possibility. She knew that patience, strategy, and careful planning would be crucial. This was not a moment for rash decisions, but for calculated moves that could turn her disadvantage into strength. The day passed quickly, but she remained focused. Calls were made, emails drafted, and plans outlined. She reached out to trusted colleagues and advisors, discussing potential paths forward. Each conversation strengthened her confidence. She began to visualize the steps needed to reclaim control, not just over her personal situation, but over the environment that had allowed such unfair treatment to occur. It was a vision of empowerment, of turning injustice into opportunity. As evening fell, she paused to reflect. The humiliation she had felt at the bank was real, but so was her capacity to overcome it. She realized that the power to change things was already within her. It was a matter of acting decisively and thoughtfully. The anger she had felt in those moments of rejection became a motivator, a driving force to fuel her actions rather than weigh her down. She understood that the situation had given her clarity, showing her exactly what needed to change and how she might lead that change. Throughout the night, she continued her research and planning. The bank that had denied her withdrawal now represented a challenge she was ready to meet head-on. Every document she read, every financial detail she analyzed added to her understanding and confidence. She was building more than a plan for recovery. She was constructing a blueprint for empowerment, a way to ensure that neither she nor anyone else would face such disrespect again. By the time she finally closed her laptop, a sense of calm determination had settled over her. The humiliation of the morning had been transformed into a vision of possibility. She was no longer a powerless customer. She was a strategist, a problem solver, and someone ready to claim her rightful place in a world that had tried to diminish her. The spark that had been ignited earlier in the day was now a steady flame, guiding her toward the next steps. She knew the journey ahead would require patience, courage, and intelligence, but she was ready. The morning had started with rejection, but it had ended with resolve. And in that resolve, she found her strength and her purpose. The day after the incident, she woke up early, her mind already buzzing with ideas and strategies. The humiliation she had experienced at the bank was still fresh, but it no longer felt like a weight pressing her down. Instead, it had become fuel. She sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, reviewing her finances and thinking through every possibility. She knew she needed a plan that was not just reactive, but transformative. It was clear to her that simply confronting the manager would not solve the deeper problem. She needed to take control in a way that would create lasting change. She began by reflecting on her own experiences and skills. She had spent years managing projects, negotiating deals, and building networks of people who trusted her judgment. She had always been strategic, thinking several steps ahead. Now she needed to apply all of that to this new challenge. She started making notes, mapping out options, and evaluating the risks and potential rewards. Each idea was considered carefully, no matter how ambitious it seemed. By mid-morning, she decided to look deeper into the bank's structure. She wanted to understand who owned it, how decisions were made, and whether there were opportunities to influence or even gain control. She discovered that the bank had multiple investors, but some of the shares were held by individuals who were open to selling. A small spark of excitement grew inside her. The thought that she could use her resources and knowledge to turn the situation around was exhilarating. She imagined a future where the same manager who had denied her withdrawal would no longer have the power to mistreat anyone else. She spent the next few hours making phone calls to financial advisors and colleagues she trusted. She explained the situation in general terms, careful not to let emotions cloud her discussions. Everyone she spoke to was impressed by her clarity and focus. They offered insights into the banking industry, potential investment strategies, and steps she could take to navigate complex financial regulations. With each conversation, her confidence grew. She realized that what had seemed like an impossible situation in the morning was slowly becoming a series of manageable challenges. Later in the afternoon, she turned her attention to building a network of support. She reached out to mentors and friends who had experience in business ownership and management. She shared her goals and asked for advice on how to approach potential investors. The response was overwhelmingly positive. People were inspired by her determination and strategic thinking. They provided guidance on timing, negotiation tactics, and long-term planning. She listened carefully, taking notes and refining her own ideas. By the end of the day, She had a clear sense of direction and a growing list of contacts who could help make her vision a reality. As evening approached, she paused to reflect on the emotional journey she had been through. She remembered the anger and humiliation from the day before, but now those feelings had transformed into purpose. She understood that this was about more than just revenge. It was about creating an environment where fairness, respect, and professionalism were non-negotiable. She wanted to ensure that no one else would have to endure the kind of treatment she had experienced. This clarity of purpose made her feel stronger, more focused, and even more determined to act. The following days were a whirlwind of research and preparation. She studied the bank's financial statements, market position, and management practices. She identified key individuals whose support could be pivotal and began drafting proposals for potential investment opportunities. Every step she took was methodical, deliberate, and focused on long-term results rather than short-term satisfaction. She was building a foundation for success, brick by brick, and the sense of control it gave her was empowering. In parallel, she started thinking about the kind of changes she wanted to implement once she had influence. She envisioned policies that prioritized inclusivity, transparency, and fairness. She imagined training programs for employees to ensure they treated every customer with respect, regardless of background. She considered mentorship programs to help young professionals develop their skills and confidence. These ideas were not just theoretical, they were concrete plans that she was determined to bring to life. She realized that the power she sought was not only about correcting past wrongs but also about creating a positive impact for the future. One morning, while reviewing her notes, she felt a surge of clarity. She had mapped out the financial steps she needed to take, identified the investors who might sell, and created a timeline for action. She also had a clear vision of the organizational changes she wanted to implement once she had control. Everything was aligned. Her skills, her resources, her network, and her determination. She felt a sense of calm excitement. This was no longer a reaction to humiliation. It was the beginning of a transformative journey. Over the next week, she began reaching out to potential investors discreetly. She presented her proposals with confidence, emphasizing both the financial benefits and the positive impact her leadership could bring. Many were intrigued by her clarity of vision and the thoroughness of her plan. Some were hesitant at first, but her persistence, knowledge, and strategic approach won them over. She was careful to maintain professionalism and to avoid letting personal feelings dictate the negotiations. Every conversation strengthened her position and brought her closer to her goal. At the same time, she continued to refine her understanding of the bank's operations. She studied market trends, customer satisfaction reports, and management practices. She wanted to be fully prepared not only to acquire influence, but also to make meaningful improvements once she had it. She took notes, asked questions, and consulted experts to ensure she was making informed decisions. Each step added to her confidence and sense of empowerment. As the days turned into weeks, her efforts began to yield tangible results. She secured commitments from key investors who were willing to sell their shares, and she finalized arrangements for funding. Every successful negotiation and every new connection reinforced her belief that she could turn the situation around. The humiliation she had experienced at the bank was no longer a defining moment. It was the catalyst for her rise. She felt a mix of satisfaction, anticipation, and focus that was both exhilarating and grounding. Throughout this period, she remained disciplined in her daily routines. She balanced research, negotiations, and strategy sessions with reflection and planning. She made time to visualize the changes she wanted to implement, imagining how the bank could become a model of fairness and professionalism. She considered the customer experience, employee training, and organizational culture, ensuring that her future leadership would be both ethical and effective. This vision kept her motivated and aligned with her long-term goals. Finally, after weeks of preparation and careful planning, she felt ready to take the next step. She had gathered the necessary resources, secured investor support, and created a detailed strategy for acquiring a controlling interest in the bank. She reviewed every aspect of her plan, making sure she had anticipated challenges and obstacles. She felt confident, prepared, and empowered. The journey that had begun with humiliation and frustration had transformed into a clear path toward justice and meaningful change. As she closed her laptop late one evening, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She thought back to the first day, the manager's dismissive attitude, and the frustration she had felt. That moment, which had initially seemed like a setback, had set her on a journey of growth, strategy, and empowerment. She realized that the incident had revealed her own resilience and capacity for decisive action. It had also shown her the power of preparation, planning, and determination. With her plan in place and her resources aligned, she felt a sense of calm determination. The path ahead was clear, and she was ready to take the steps necessary to achieve her goal. She knew that the journey would require patience, intelligence, and careful execution, but she was confident in her ability to succeed. The humiliation she had faced had been transformed into motivation, the spark of a plan that would not only restore her dignity, but also create a positive impact for others. As she turned off the lights and prepared for sleep, she felt a quiet excitement about the future. The morning of rejection had been painful, but it had also revealed a path forward. She was no longer a passive observer. She was a strategist, a planner, and someone ready to claim the power and influence that rightfully belonged to her. The journey of transformation had begun, and she was ready to take every step with focus, determination, and purpose. The following week, she put her plan into action. She had secured the support of a few key investors who were willing to sell their shares, and she had gathered enough capital to make a strong offer. Everything had been carefully calculated, and she approached the process with the same calm determination she had shown in her research and planning. Every call, every meeting, every document she prepared was executed with precision and focus. There was no room for error, and she understood that patience and clarity were as important as financial resources. She began by meeting with a senior investor who held a significant portion of the bank's shares. The meeting was formal but polite. She presented her vision for the future, explaining not only how her leadership would increase profits, but also how it would create a more ethical, respectful, and inclusive environment. The investor listened carefully, asking questions, testing her resolve, and probing her understanding of the banking business. She answered every question confidently, drawing on her months of preparation and deep knowledge of the financial landscape. By the end of the meeting, the investor was convinced of her capability and agreed to sell a portion of their shares. Encouraged by this success, she reached out to other potential sellers. Some were hesitant at first, wary of her youth and the audacity of her ambition, but her confidence, preparation, and professionalism won them over. She made clear that her plan was not about personal revenge, but about creating a positive and transformative impact on the bank's culture and operations. Her vision resonated with investors who wanted to be part of a leadership change that promised both financial growth and ethical responsibility. Slowly but surely, the shares she needed began to come together. Throughout this period, she continued to manage her own time carefully. Mornings were dedicated to research and financial modeling, ensuring every figure, every investment, and every calculation was precise. Afternoons were spent meeting investors, negotiating terms, and building alliances. Evenings were reserved for reflection, planning, and preparing for the next day. Each step was deliberate, and she found satisfaction in the steady progress she was making. The momentum built with every successful negotiation, every supportive conversation, and every resolved challenge. As she worked, she also began to think about the human side of her plan. She envisioned the changes she would implement once she had influence over the bank. She thought about the employees who had unknowingly perpetuated a culture of bias, and how she could help them grow through training, awareness programs, and leadership opportunities. She thought about customers who deserved respect and fairness, and how her leadership could transform their experiences. Her focus was not just on acquiring control, but on creating meaningful, lasting impact that would improve the lives of many. One afternoon, she met with a legal advisor to ensure that her acquisition process complied with all banking regulations. The advisor reviewed contracts, shareholder agreements, and legal procedures, providing guidance and reassurance. She listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions whenever clarification was needed. The legal steps were complex, but her diligence and preparation made the process manageable. By the end of the meeting, she felt confident that she was on the right path and that every detail had been accounted for. While the financial and legal work progressed, she also began to cultivate her public image in a subtle way. She attended industry events, networked with other professionals, and shared insights about banking innovation and ethical leadership. People began to take notice of her expertise, clarity, and vision. She did not boast about her plans, but allowed her competence and dedication to speak for itself. Each connection she made added credibility and opened doors to new opportunities. During this time, she faced moments of doubt and fatigue. Negotiations could be slow, obstacles appeared unexpectedly, and some investors changed their minds. But she reminded herself of the incident that had sparked this journey. The humiliation she had faced at the bank was a powerful motivator, reminding her why she had begun this process in the first place. She leaned on her network of mentors and advisors for support, gaining perspective and encouragement whenever she needed it. These moments reinforced her resilience and strengthened her commitment to seeing the plan through. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings, she sat at her desk and reviewed her progress. The pieces were falling into place. She had secured enough shares to gain significant influence over the bank, and her vision for ethical leadership was clear and compelling. She took a moment to reflect on how far she had come since the incident at the bank. What had started as frustration and humiliation had transformed into strategic action, personal growth, and empowerment. The journey had taught her patience, resilience, and the power of turning setbacks into opportunities. With the major shares secured, she began preparing for the formal acquisition process. She coordinated with legal advisors, financial institutions, and key stakeholders to ensure a smooth transition. Every detail was carefully checked, every contingency accounted for. She knew that the success of her plan depended on precision, timing, and the ability to act decisively when the opportunity arose. She felt a sense of readiness and anticipation, knowing that the moment to reclaim control was near. As the day of the acquisition approached, she also thought about the moment she would return to the bank that had once denied her. She imagined walking through those doors, not as a customer, but as the person with authority. The thought filled her with both excitement and calm determination. She was not motivated by anger or revenge. She was motivated by justice, fairness, and the desire to create a positive environment for everyone involved. This mindset kept her focused and grounded as she completed the final steps of the acquisition. Finally, the day arrived. With all approvals in place, funding secured, and legal requirements met, she was ready to take control. She signed the necessary documents, officially becoming a major shareholder with the power to influence the bank's leadership and policies. The moment was both exhilarating and humbling. She thought about the journey she had taken, the preparation, the negotiations, the planning, and the perseverance that had brought her to this point. Every challenge, every setback, and every moment of doubt had shaped her into a leader ready to make a difference. With the acquisition complete, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The humiliation at the bank, which had seemed so devastating at the time, now felt like a distant memory. It had been the catalyst for growth, strategy, and empowerment. She had turned a negative experience into an opportunity to create meaningful change, not just for herself, but for others who might face similar challenges. The journey had been long and demanding, but the results were tangible and transformative. As evening fell, she looked out of her office window, thinking about the future. She had achieved a significant milestone, but her work was far from over. She planned to meet with the bank's management team soon, to begin implementing the changes she had envisioned. She wanted to create a culture of respect, fairness, and professionalism, where no customer would feel dismissed or marginalized. Her journey had begun with a personal experience of injustice, but it was evolving into a larger mission of leadership and positive impact. Throughout the day, she reflected on the lessons she had learned. Preparation, patience, strategic thinking, and resilience were crucial to achieving her goals. She had learned that setbacks could be transformed into opportunities with the right mindset and careful planning. She had also realized the importance of maintaining professionalism, even in the face of injustice, and of using intelligence and strategy to create meaningful change. These lessons would guide her as she moved forward, not just as an investor, but as a leader committed to transforming the bank for the better. By the time she left her office that evening, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment and readiness. The next steps involved meeting the staff, assessing the management, and beginning the process of implementing the changes she had envisioned. She knew that leadership was not just about authority, but about creating an environment where fairness, respect, and professionalism were at the core of every decision. She was prepared to lead with integrity, vision, and determination, transforming the bank into a place that reflected her values and commitment to positive change. The journey that had begun with a moment of humiliation at a single bank counter had evolved into a story of empowerment, strategy, and leadership. She had taken control of the situation with intelligence, patience, and resolve, turning a personal setback into a transformative opportunity. The acquisition of the bank was not the end of her journey, but a powerful beginning. She was ready to step into her new role with confidence, purpose, and a vision for creating a better future for everyone connected to the bank. The day she returned to the bank, the air felt different. She walked through the doors with calm confidence, carrying herself with a presence that commanded attention. Staff and customers alike noticed her, some curious, some confused, as she made her way to the front of the building. This time, she was not there as a customer asking for permission. She was there as the person who held authority. The transformation from the woman who had been denied service to the person with control over the bank was both dramatic and empowering. She called a brief meeting with the branch staff and the former manager. Everyone was aware of her new position, but the reaction was a mix of surprise, anxiety, and uncertainty. The manager who had denied her withdrawal tried to maintain composure, though it was clear she understood the gravity of the situation. The woman spoke calmly but firmly, outlining her vision for the branch and the standards she expected. Respect, fairness, and professionalism were at the forefront of her message. She made it clear that discrimination or dismissive behavior would no longer be tolerated. The atmosphere was tense but focused. She explained that her goal was not to punish out of anger, but to create a positive environment for both employees and customers. She highlighted the importance of teamwork, ethical practices, and attentiveness to client needs. She wanted each employee to understand that their actions directly affected the bank's reputation and success. Her words carried authority because they were backed by action, preparation, and her position as an influential shareholder. After the meeting, she met individually with the manager who had denied her withdrawal. She explained her expectations clearly, that professional conduct and equitable treatment of every customer were non-negotiable. She provided examples of what had gone wrong in the past and offered guidance on how to improve, though she also made it clear that positions of authority could be reassessed if improvement was not demonstrated. The manager listened, clearly shaken but attentive. The message was not personal vengeance but accountability and an expectation for professional growth. She also spent time talking to the other staff members. Some were defensive, unsure how to react to the sudden change in leadership. Others were quietly supportive, relieved that a fair and capable leader was now in charge. She listened to their concerns, asked questions, and encouraged honest feedback. Her approach was not authoritarian. It was strategic and empathetic. She wanted staff to feel both challenged and supported, to understand that excellence would be expected, but help would be provided to achieve it. The woman then reviewed the bank's operations with a critical eye. She assessed customer service procedures, security protocols, and daily workflows. She identified areas that could be improved immediately and created a plan for short-term and long-term changes. Every decision she made was based on efficiency, fairness, and ethical responsibility. She was determined to ensure that the bank's culture reflected these values and that every customer interaction demonstrated respect and competence. In parallel, she began implementing small but meaningful changes to signal a shift in leadership. Notices about customer-first policies were posted, new training sessions were scheduled, and employee evaluations were updated to reflect expectations of fairness and professionalism. The changes were visible and tangible, sending a message that the bank was entering a new era. Employees began to understand that the standards had changed, and that they were accountable for their actions in a more structured and supportive environment. During her time at the branch, she also took the opportunity to meet with regular customers. She wanted to understand their experiences, hear their concerns, and explain her commitment to improving service. Many customers were surprised to see her there, but they appreciated her genuine interest and proactive approach. She listened to their stories, acknowledged past mistakes, and assured them that their experiences would now be treated with respect and priority. Her interactions were professional, empathetic, and solution-oriented, reinforcing the positive changes she was bringing to the bank. The former manager, meanwhile, had to confront the reality of the situation. She had once held authority, but now had to operate under the guidance of the woman she had previously dismissed. The shift in power was humbling, and the woman handled it with professionalism. She provided clear expectations, timelines for improvement, and guidance for professional conduct. It was an opportunity for growth, and while difficult, it reinforced the central message. Fairness and competence were now paramount. In addition to managing staff and customers, the woman also worked on operational efficiency. She streamlined processes, introduced clearer protocols for handling customer requests, and ensured transparency in all transactions. She wanted the bank to function not only as a profitable business, but also as a model of ethical and professional practice. Every change she implemented reflected her vision of integrity, accountability, and respect for all stakeholders. Throughout the day, she remained composed and focused. She understood the importance of leading by example, demonstrating the behaviors and standards she expected from others. Her calm authority and strategic approach inspired confidence in those who observed her. Employees began to see that her leadership was thoughtful, deliberate, and fair. Her actions spoke louder than any words, creating an environment where respect and professionalism were clearly valued. As the week progressed, the staff began to adapt to the new expectations. Some were enthusiastic, embracing the chance to learn and grow under competent leadership. Others were cautious, still adjusting to the shift in authority. She worked closely, with each employee providing feedback, support, and encouragement where needed. The culture of the branch began to change visibly, with improved customer interactions and a renewed sense of professionalism among the staff. She also reviewed the branch's performance metrics, identifying opportunities for growth and improvement. Her focus was not just on correcting past mistakes, but on building a sustainable system that would maintain high standards over time. She encouraged collaboration, rewarded initiative, and created mechanisms for accountability. Employees started to see the benefits of a structured, fair, and supportive work environment, and morale gradually improved. One morning, she observed a staff member struggling with a customer interaction. Instead of reprimanding harshly, she guided them through the process, demonstrating effective communication and problem-solving skills. The employee learned quickly, and the customer left satisfied. Moments like these reinforced her approach. Leadership was about guidance, support, and accountability, not fear or punishment. The branch began to run more smoothly, and the positive energy was noticeable to both staff and customers. By the end of the week, the branch had undergone significant transformation. The former manager had begun to understand and accept the new standards, and the staff overall had adjusted to the expectations of fairness, professionalism, and respect. Customers noticed the changes and responded positively, appreciating the improved service and attention. The woman's leadership had begun to take root, creating a foundation for continued growth and improvement. Reflecting on the week, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The journey that had begun with rejection and humiliation had now reached a pivotal moment. She had reclaimed her dignity, exercised authority responsibly, and set in motion a culture of fairness and professionalism. Her approach had been deliberate, strategic, and human-centric, focusing on both operational efficiency and the well-being of employees and customers alike. She knew that the work was ongoing. Changing a culture, even in a single branch, required consistency, patience, and continued guidance. But the initial steps had been successful, and the foundation for long-term improvement was solid. She felt confident that with sustained effort, the branch would continue to thrive, setting an example for other branches and reinforcing the values she championed. The experience also reinforced lessons she had learned throughout her journey. Patience, preparation, strategic thinking, empathy, and integrity were essential for effective leadership. She had turned a moment of injustice into an opportunity to create meaningful change, demonstrating that power exercised thoughtfully and responsibly could transform lives and institutions alike. The humiliation she had faced had been a catalyst, but the transformation she was now leading was a testament to her resilience, intelligence, and vision. As she left the branch that evening, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The staff had adjusted, Customers had noticed the positive changes and the foundation for a fair, respectful, and professional environment had been established. She knew that her journey was not over, but she had taken decisive steps that marked the beginning of a new era for the bank. The experience had taught her that challenges could be converted into opportunities, setbacks into strategies, and injustice into meaningful leadership. She walked away with confidence, purpose, and the knowledge that the future was now in her hands. The weeks after she took control of the bank were a mix of intense activity and quiet reflection. She spent her mornings at the branch, walking through every department, observing operations and meeting employees individually. She wanted to ensure that the changes she had begun were sustainable and that each staff member understood their role in creating a respectful and professional environment. Her presence was steady, calm, and approachable, and employees began to feel a sense of pride in their work and a connection to her vision. She held weekly meetings with her team to discuss progress, challenges, and customer feedback. The meetings were structured but open, encouraging staff to share their experiences and suggest improvements. She emphasized that every voice mattered, that success was a team effort, and that accountability was essential. Slowly, trust began to build between her and the employees. They started to see her not just as a figure of authority, but as a leader who genuinely cared about their growth, development, and the experience of the customers. Her focus was not only on internal operations, but also on building the bank's reputation externally. She met with community leaders, local business owners, and long-term customers to discuss the bank's renewed commitment to fairness, inclusivity, and professional service. She wanted everyone who interacted with the bank to feel valued and respected. Her efforts paid off quickly. Word spread about the changes, and more people began to trust and engage with the bank. The institution started to gain a reputation not only for financial stability, but also for ethical leadership and excellent customer service. Meanwhile, the former manager, who had once denied her withdrawal, had to adapt fully to the new environment. She received additional training, guidance, and mentorship. While the initial transition was difficult, the manager began to understand the standards required and the importance of accountability. Her attitude gradually shifted, and she started to engage with staff and customers in ways that aligned with the new vision. The woman who had once been humiliated found satisfaction in seeing that even those who had wronged her could grow and improve under fair leadership. The woman also began implementing structured programs for employee development. She introduced mentorship opportunities, workshops on professional skills, and courses on ethical customer service. These programs helped employees feel supported, empowered, and confident. Staff members who had been uncertain or resistant at first now began to embrace the changes. Morale improved, and the branch became a place where people were proud to work. The energy and focus she brought created a ripple effect, inspiring excellence and fostering a sense of community within the workplace. Her attention to detail extended to every aspect of the bank's operations. She reviewed policies, updated procedures, and ensured that every transaction, customer interaction, and decision reflected fairness and professionalism. She also introduced regular audits and feedback mechanisms to maintain transparency and accountability. Her approach was not punitive but proactive, aiming to prevent mistakes and improve performance continuously. Employees began to see that these changes were designed to help them succeed, not to control them unnecessarily.